Welcome back. We're going to be working through the cart tutorial section 2, dealing with the filter search for the products. One thing I want to do is kind of do an add to cart, kind of rename for the function so it matches the remove cart. No big deal, just now that they kind of more consistent naming. I'm going to add some more products. That way we'll have a little more details to work with. As you can see, I'm going to build a window that ultimately is a certain size, and I just want you to see the demonstration of what happens when that window gets activated. So I got to add a class to the parent of the two items I'm going to have scroll. And 400 is the height I want it to start automatically scrolling at. And you can change this in the future. Sometimes I do things based on the height of the actual browser window. Just pretty easy stuff. You just ask it what the height is and then tell it you want a percentage of that. And so now I'm also going to add item price to the cart. So as you check out, it'll just have that represented as well. And let's get on to our filter. So basically this is just an input field. And as I type in it, I'm going to basically do on change and ask what this filter's value is, or the input field is. Name is going to be the key here. Filter items is the name. And so I'm going to be looking for the value of that. Name is one of those things where ideally that's what I try to reference all my input fields with. I don't use a lot of IDs, things like that. This is the name one works very well. So let's get going. Here's the value. I'm going to go ahead and create a variable based on that value on change. And then I'm going to go ahead and take that value and set it into a state called item search, and it's just going to represent the characters that value has. And for the most part, I'm just going to match those characters up with the item name, and if they don't match, then it doesn't get returned, and then we don't build it. So I take that down here to our map. Well, first I want to make sure that it's lowercase. Anything I'm ever going to compare, make sure that they're all lowercase. It makes it a lot easier. So I'll set up my item name to lowercase. And then I do a comparison. If temp name has the index of that character search, if it's in there, it'll have a number. If it's not in there, it'll be -1. So ultimately, if there's a number, then it gets returned. If it's -1, it doesn't get returned. And we'll do a console log to see if it worked. Do the temp name versus the item search. Okay. Let's put these next to each other. And as I'm searching, you can see that we got an error. And this is very typical of errors. As you can see, I have two lowercase with the C needs to be capitalized, but I screw around here for a few minutes not noticing that. It already was a string, so there we go. I figured it out. Very typical of errors. It's just usually something small. And we don't need it to a string. It already was a string. So let's get this back in order. Start running it again. There you go. It is now matching up perfectly with what I wanted to do. So it's only returning the items that were necessary. Welcome back. This is the purchase log section. Initially, I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup here. I want some space between the name of the item in the cart and the trash can, so I'm just going to put a little bit of space. And as you can see, that's no big deal. Just fixed it up. And let's start building the button for our submit cart. and we're doing an on-click. Alright, let's create the actual function itself. I'm just going to put a little note in here that this is going to be saved locally. It's for now. Later on, we'll bring in Axios, and we will have a server, and so on and so forth. I do a lot of my beginning stuff locally, so I kind of understand what my data is going to be looking like, and I get an understanding of how it's going to be represented. It's a little easier to back out and fix before I get into the back end. So if I can play around on the front end and get it right, it's easier. So let's define my current cart. And initially I want to check and see if there's already data stored locally, because if so, then I'm going to take that empty box or the empty object of current cart and turn it into whatever we had saved. Now keep in mind, anything saved in local storage is a string. So you just need to wrap it in a JSON parse to get it back into a working object. So if it exists, then I'm going to use it. If not, it's an empty object and we move on. Okay, so another thing here is I need to identify these sales. Each cart is going to have a shared time stamp. And that's going to be having all the way down to the millisecond. So the year all the way down to the millisecond, and then whoever the user was that made the sale. And so when I do a search, I can find out, based on the timestamp, what was sold at when by who. Here we go. Let's go ahead and give it a shot. Notice I got the timestamp down there. Now the timestamp here is the Greenwich Mean Time, so I think I have to look it up. I think I'm 8 hours difference from that one, which I'll have to calculate later in. But right now I'll use it. And I'm just going to type in static what my email address is. Later on, it'll be based on who's logged in. And once again, I'm a big fan of doing some kind of temp variable so we can walk through it. And here I shall build out what I want this object to look like for the cart thus far. Like I said, since we're in the front end, I can change it at any time and it won't be a big deal. There we go. This is what our ID is going to look like now. They will all share. Each cart will have a unique one. So they'll have multiple products that were sold, and if they were all sold at one time by one user, they'll all have this one ID. So each sale can be brought up independently. And we'll go through our item names and price as well. I mean, you can bring in images, you can bring in details, you can generate an ID if you like. There's a lot of options. So the spread operator is going to be helping out here. There we go. Let's build this out. As you can see, I've saved my data. We do have a timestamp that's working. Once we make the sale, I'm going to take the cart list and then empty it out. No reason to keep it there. So if you hit submit, that clears it out. Boom. Welcome back. Let's get into toggling info boxes. This is something I do quite a bit. A lot of times I just need to have items come in and out based on the user's interactions. This one in particular is going to ask them if they're absolutely sure they would like to submit this cart. It's the last thing they do before the actual sale goes out, so it's a great place to stop human error. I recommend doing this pretty much on anything you build. Interestingly enough, that means that this submit cart button will only do a toggle of another button, and we're going to take out submit cart and apply it later on. It's just something I actually learned a long time ago, and I've stuck with. I found to be very useful. So we're going to set toggle to the info box that's going to actually hold the option to submit cart. So if it doesn't equal submit cart, we show the button, and if it does say submit cart, then now we will show the info box. Info box typically, in this case, is going to be red, and it's going to be an alert. That brings along with it some padding, a nice color. The font will work with the color well. It's already been predetermined for Bootstrap and all of the themes that Bootstrap has, so let's stick with it. And like I said, it's just a "are you sure" concept, and then we put the two options next to them, yes or no. There we go. Submit cart is actually going to fire off here instead. You'll see what I mean if you don't quite understand in a second. And then if they say no, then we're going to toggle this field out. We're going to get rid of this div, and it'll be like they didn't type anything. They didn't suggest that they wanted to submit if they hit no. Toggle will just go back to its default. I'm missing my class for spacing. Here we go. There we go. So would I like to submit, yes or no? If I say yes, it'll work. There we go. I hit yes, so it took everything out. Our sale was complete. And those are all the other sales we have as well. Let's build the purchase log. We are going to be using use effect for React, which means it's going to fire off when the module gets loaded. I only want this function to fire off once, otherwise we can get ourselves into trouble. So I'm going to be using a state called loaded, and it's going to be false initially, and then once I've fired off the function once, it'll turn into true, and I won't run it again. You'll see the comparison in the use effect fields. Use effect will help me fire this off. So loaded is false. If loaded is false, I need you to fire this off. After it's fired off, I'll be putting the loaded to true, so guaranteeing it won't fire off twice. I'm going to take a close look and see if there's already local storage cart information. If so, we'll utilize that. I don't really like the word cart, to be honest with you. Let's go purchase log. It'd be easier. So cart's not a thing anymore in our local storage, so I'm going to have to clear that out, and it's going to be changed to purchase log. So if that exists, then use that. Obviously, we're going to change it from the string, and if it was in the local storage, back into an object. spelled state wrong. For starters, let's go ahead and put the purchase log underneath. I'm going to bang around a little bit and see where I like it. Ultimately, the purchase log is going to be in its own module. So right now, I'm just writing it in here just to get started. Not thinking it's going to look great underneath the actual cart. It's a little too much information, so it will be changed. Okay, let's go ahead and walk through whatever purchase log we have by using the map function. I'm going to use each item in the object is going to be represented as sale. And this is also just going to be a list like our others, and I'm going to be bringing in the Bootstrap classes. And let's paste in, let's just bring in a line item here, and then from there we can name it appropriately. And obviously we're going to have the name of the ID. We're going to need to have what item was sold and what the cost was. Like I said a while back, we can change this up. We can bring in images. We can bring in details. We can have other types of IDs. This is where we're starting. And when we want to elaborate on it, thank God we're in the front end so we can do it with ease before it ever starts on the back end database. A badge is going to be representing our ID. It's something that Bootstrap brings together that makes it stand out a little bit. You'll see what I mean in a second. And they have the same concepts of coloring that Bootstrap has for alerts, colors, you name it. They all kind of have the same naming concept. So secondary, danger, success, info, those are all going to be useful adjectives for the badge. And then they'll change based on that name. They'll change the color. So I'll be returning each sale into a line item. Each item gets put in here. I'm going to give it a shot. Let's see if the badge looks good on its own line. I'm not getting any details. From what I remember, I renamed the local storage variable, and I shall be realizing that here in a second. It's now called purchase log, like we spoke of. I don't like that color of that button. Let's get that out of there and go info. Okay. Let's go this direction. Okay. So yes, I want to make that purchase. As you can see, it is now called purchase log as the key, and our value is there. Reading ID looks like I had a little spot wrong in the name of the ID. All right, so our purchase log is there, and ugly as can be. So there it is, purchase log. Let's go ahead and get rid of that badge being on its own line. I don't like that. And I'm going to capitalize the name of the items within our purchase log. And it looks like the list item has something that overrides it, so I'm going to basically wrap it in a span with the same class, as opposed to try to rewrite the list group item stipulations based on whatever is stopping me. There we go. Now I can supersede and capitalize my item. Yeah, it looks better. Still in the wrong spot. We'll fix that in a minute. Filter search purchase logs. Basically, we're going to be using date initially to search through our purchase log. The year, the month, the day, and the hour are all going to be relevant within the search. Each purchase, each cart, all the items in that cart are going to share a sale ID. It's going to have this timestamp that I speak of, along with the user who actually made the sale, the one operating the application. So we're going to go through kind of a tedious part of building multiple select menus based on the year, the month, the day, and the hour. And that will be our search. And like I said, later on we'll bring in one based on employees. And you'll get to, this is an opportunity for you to watch me fumble about and kind of figure out what looks best as well. As you can see, I've misnamed a couple things, so I'm going to go through and clear all this information up. When these select menus change, it's going to run through and get the values of all of them, and then that will be our new comparison character to compare with the sale ID, and then within that sale ID there will be a timestamp. So that's how this all works. Now I'm going to put together a counter. If there's going to be multiple drop-down menus with numbers in them, as opposed to me writing the HTML multiple times, I basically generate the numbers via JavaScript. And then from there, I map through them for the options of the select menus. And one of the details of these are anything that's under 9 needs to have a 0 in front of it, whether it be the month, day, or year. So that's just so it'll match up with the timestamps. And so I unfortunately have to write that all in. Probably people have any number of ways to do this. I know Moment is something people would probably incorporate as far as if you like to use plugins. I coincidentally don't use that many plugins. I just write it. So here's me putting together a map to go through and create my option tags. This will be the month, so if it gets to 13, it's too much. And so if counter is more than 1, which it will be by this point, then start working. And we need to do the key for, obviously for React. And I need to do form control for the class name, so this looks nice with nice padding. And I realize there's now 2 class names, and the other one needs to be named. So I've made that mistake through all the HTML. I'll have to go replace those real quick. Unfortunately, the number counter needs to be num. There we go. So if it's below 13, go ahead and punch out the option tag, and that'll be for the month. And I didn't have to write a whole bunch of HTML. Just thank you, JavaScript. This one's all the way to 32, so as long as it's below 32, that'll be the one for the days. Now I need to put together a default, and you'll see why here in a minute. I need to have them for the search reasons, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out searching based on the month alone. Now if they'd like to get specific, they can do that, but it starts out as a default on select day and hour, because we just want to show the month that we're currently in as default. So we don't care about what day it is at this point. Okay, I need to apply form control and change those to names to identify each one now. And so here we go, the result. It looks like the month is still off. So it's representing the month correctly. That's just one of the things there. I need to tell it what year, what month, and what day it is. Well, month, not day. And it will default to that instead here in a second. You'll see. I'm going to put the title in with the basic margin on the y-axis at 3. Thank you, Bootstrap, for writing that for me so I don't have to make something up. Those paddings are really nice, and the margins are really nice. I hope everybody utilizes those. Okay, now I'm kind of working around what this page is supposed to look like. It's wrapped in all sorts of things, so I'm going to make 2 rows instead, so it's not connected with the cart up above it. And that also means I need to bring in a React fragment, because now this is 2 units instead of 1 or 2 tags, so let's wrap them back together so React doesn't get upset. And it looks it's got more space, it's starting to look better. The purchase log module. Now, just like we did with cart, I'm going to make a new file called purchaselog.js, and that's going to be our purchase log module. That way I can represent it on multiple pages. I mean, who knows why I would want it on multiple pages, but I can put it wherever I want to if I make it a module. I'll just go ahead and build out this so we can get started. Let's grab all the HTML for the counter and the purchase log, everything I'm going to need, and just swing it in here. It also helps kind of clear up the cart.js because it was getting kind of crowded. We'll bring over the use effect. And obviously we're going to have to return something, so let's get that HTML. Also, within app, I need to import this purchase log. And we'll put it in the same place. It'll just be below the cart like it was a second ago. So app is really kind of the parent of all the modules thus far. And I'm just taking out the React fragment. We don't need to mess with that anymore. Let's go ahead and just paste in the HTML that we want to use for the purchase log here. And let's go ahead and get a column all the way across for the heading so the padding matches. And now it lives within the row. And we also are going to be using state, so let's represent that and import it. I need the loaded that we utilized for the use effect. Let's match some timestamps. Okay, so here are our year, month, day menus, and when they are changed, at any of them are changed, then we have to gather all their values and then we'll tie them together and compare them with the list of different items chosen, and if they are selected, if any of them match, then we'll represent those. Building data is a little tricky, and there's a lot of ways to use this. Like I mentioned earlier, moment is something people use quite a bit. I'm just going to break these down into a standard string. It's already something JavaScript does. Now, it's going to be based on Greenwich Mean Time, so we're going to need to do some updating eventually so that it matches my time zone. But from here, I need to let the menus know what month it is, and therefore also what year it's going to be, so that they know where to land for default on load. So anything that's been sold this month, hypothetically, will be loaded up by default. Now you'll notice I do a lot of wrapping with the number. Now that's based on the thing is, out of habit, a lot of things just end up being strings, and I don't want to mess with that. So if I'm doing a comparison and it's going to be against an actual number, a lot of times I just wrap it just because. And I don't want to start playing around. It's like if it's a string and it won't compare, then it's a waste of time. So that's just a habit of mine to guarantee numbers. Now, obviously, anything that's below 10 needs to have a 0 in front of it, or it won't match the timestamp, just like I said a little while ago. Now here I'm actually going to compare it. Selected is basically it's an attribute that'll say where the menu needs to land on load. It's like the default. Now typically everyone knows it would just be the first one, and I'm changing that. So as this maps through, it does a comparison of each hour. And coincidentally, I'm not going to need this. I'll be taking it out because I only need it elsewhere, because this one doesn't get fired off on default. But still, let's walk through this. If the hour matches the number, then selected will become true. Otherwise, it'll be false. Based on that, if it matches the current hour, the current month, and the current day, all the menu for the hour and day and month, those will all basically default to what it tells it to, based on current day. And it's also going, since it's the way this timestamp goes is a 24-hour day, like a military. Some people use it, some people don't. I'm going to be switching it. I'm keeping it with the military time, but I will be switching it from the generic Greenwich Mean Time to -7 or 8. I have to go look. But you will see how this is all coming together. So based on the day, and once again, just another example I'll be taking out in a second. If day equals number, then selected is true, otherwise it's false. And tells it what default to land on. It's another great thing about iterating through something, that you can make these comparisons as opposed to being static. I guess I could do it another way on load based on if it was static, but there's always a way to do something. Month always comes out funky. Everybody knows to do a little +1. Okay, so it does know now the time, the date, and everything. And I'm only using the 2 equal signs instead of 3 because just in case one of them is not an actual number and it's a string, I can still compare them. Now I just realized that I wasted my time with the hour comparison because the default is not going to bother with the hour. And similar to our search on the products, we're just going to be comparing characters. And as opposed to something we typed into that input field for searching products, we're just comparing it against a timestamp on the purchase itself. Same exact concept, just not input fields, select menus instead. Now I just need to build out these select menus to generate a string that matches the same format as the timestamp. So I need to bring in my variables for year, month, day, hour. Yeah, I think I actually used DAY. I would recommend doing DY in the future for anybody who wants to stay consistent, but not a huge deal. Just make sure you keep your eyes open for things like consistency and naming. Working alone, not as big of a deal, but there's a lot of different things I do working alone. You can tell that I'm not doing a ton of writing test scripts because since I'm the only one, that's how this works. Now here's an example of our timestamps, just true format. Now keep in mind, every time I want to put this all together, I need to match that format. Otherwise, this is never going to work. There's going to be the dashes, there's a big capital T in the middle, all that stuff needs to be represented within my search. Another thing that I also need to do based on this search is if they are not searching they're just searching for the month, then I need to make sure that we're on default for the day and the hour. And if they're searching by day, then the hour is irrelevant. And so in which case I need to get it to basically just work with what's being represented. And we can go all the way back to the year. So if they're all at default and we're just searching year, then I need to make sure that this is going to work out. I can't have a bunch of spaces and then all of a sudden it represents the hour. The hour, that wouldn't work. So if the month is not represented in the search, then nor shall the day and the hour, and it goes down from there. Now keep in mind, within those defaults, the first item on the select menu, the value actually equals default as opposed to just nothing at all. I tend to do that quite a bit. I can tell a little bit more about what's going on, and I do that a lot for the validation. If it equals default, do this, so on and so forth. looks like select month is missing a capital M, but you can see how this is working out. Let's take a look at what this looks like currently. Gotta get rid of this attempt underneath. Select Mo needs to be capitalized with the M. I see a lot of those. Let's apply the timeshirts function to each one of these drop-down select menus, and it'll be on change. We'll fire it off, and it will check the values of each one of these so they can generate a string that hopefully will match our timestamp. And make sure that these are not constants that can't be changed. There we go. There, our timestamp is now showing up, and as you can see, it's getting closer to matching what we intended. You got to get rid of that hyphen. All right, one more time. Looking better. Now we can drill down. And now it is going to start matching the timestamp format. And here we can go ahead and set this. Compare time will be representing what we're going to ask is available and what we can match. Just like our filter earlier, if compare time ends up being something that matches, then it will be displayed. We're going to fire off the same function that we did on change with those select menus. We're going to be firing those off on load as well within the use effect. So it'll start with our default. Now, I'm going to check the sale ID. If compare time has matching characters, then we shall return a line item. If it doesn't match, it'll be a -1. We shall not return a line item. We don't need to have that default selected on the day. The line item definitely needs a key during the map. All right, let's fire off that function on load so we have a default. And on default, I'm basically going to ask it a little bit about the current time so we can get our default working. And we'll also apply the year to work down here with JavaScript instead of being static. There we go. So we'll start off with the year and the month. Anything last month will not be showing up unless they decide to change it on the month select menu. I am going to need to close the get full year. There we go. Correct. There we go. Let's clean up a little bit. Okay, so let's see if this works. I'm going to buy some items, submit them. Now I want to do some searching. All right, let's change these up. Looks like I'm getting different data based on the day. And make some more buys. I want to select those. Let's change this around. We are getting new data based on our day.